Our speaker has some powerful words to share with you. I just love them, okay? You married, right? Just kidding. Anyway, but he is just great, and we had a chance to talk to him this morning, so I'm real fired up. I am so fired up. And you're going to be fired up once you hear him. So what I want you to do is sit back, enjoy the next 2 days, enjoy COA, because we got it going on over here on the island. I know y'all, it's half of y'all ain't even been over here. But anyway, but we got it going on. And Adrian, thank you for having me do the welcome. And I want to thank you for volunteering us to host this event, okay?
So I also get the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker today. Dr. Blake mentioned his name, MK Asante, flew out here to make sure to speak to us. I also wanted to let everyone know that after MK Asante is done speaking, he'll be signing his book, which is for sale, Buck, right here to the right. It says for sale in our bookstore. And students who are here, attendees as associate students, you'll have each a copy you see sitting down there. It's right in front of you. But before we continue with MK Asante, I want to share a few things that MK Asante has done to affect education, to affect students' lives. When I say a few things, I mean he's done a lot. When I came in, my mother said, wow, he looks very young. I thought he was maybe your age, Adrian, and I think he is. But he looks very young, but he's accomplished so much. And I know he's done a lot of great things. So let me just share that with you now. Mr. Asante is a best-selling author, an award-winning filmmaker, a rapper, and a professor who CNN calls a master storyteller and a major creative force. He is the author of acclaimed memoir, Buck, described by Maya Angelou as a story of surviving and thriving with passion, compassion, wit, and style. Buck made the Washington Post bestseller list in 2014 and 2015, and is an NAACP Image Award finalist. His other books are It's Bigger Than Hip Hop, Beautiful and Ugly Too, I had a conversation about this, and Like Water Running Off My Back. Mr. Asante is a Sundance feature film fellow for the movie adaptation of Buck. He directed the prize-winning Stars TV documentary, The Black Candle, and wrote and produced 500 Years Later, winner of 5 International Film Festival Awards. Asante studied at the University of London, earned a BA from Lafayette College, and an MFA from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Asante has given distinguished lectures at Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and as well as 100 other universities, including College of Alameda now. He has toured in over 40 countries and was awarded the key to the city of Dallas in Texas. Called the voice of a new generation by Essence, he has been featured on the CBS Early Show, NBC News, BBC, Revolt, NPR, BET, The Breakfast Club, and MTV. Now that's a mouthful. He was elected as 100 History Makers in the Making by MSNBC. The griot and his inspirational story, The Blank Page, is featured in the #1 New York Times bestseller, Chicken Soup for the Soul, 20th Anniversary Edition. Asante's essays have been published in USA Today, Huffington Post, San Francisco Chronicle, and the New York Times. Described by the Vibe magazine as brilliantly complex, Asante is a rap artist who has performed on 4 continents. His debut music project, The Buck, original book soundtrack, was described by OK Player as one of the most moving and visually brilliant rap projects to land in quite some time. Asante is a tenured professor of creative writing and film in the Department of English and Language Arts at Morgan State University, and he welcomes us today with words that I look forward to. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Asante.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Hey, good. Do I even need the mic? I do? Okay. All right, well, it's so good to be here. Really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's early and people are out, so I love it. Before I start, I want to just thank a couple people that made this possible. Sitting right next to me, I want to thank Dr. Blake. So give it up for Dr. Blake. Really, it's rare that you come across a university president that has, so much vision and innovation and wants to change things and do things in a way that's non-traditional, shake things up, and really, stand behind that, and willing to put her resources where her mouth is. So I think that's wonderful, Dr. Blake. I also want to thank Tino back there for making this happen. Worked really hard with my coordinator to make all this happen, so thank you. I want to thank Adrian for that great introduction and just emceeing this event. And then I want to thank all of you individually. Laney College, Merritt, we got College of Alameda. Who else? Berkeley. Oh, there we go. So give you guys a round of applause. Okay, so, I'm going to talk a little bit today just about my journey in education and about Buck. Buck is my book that you all have a free copy of. If you don't have a free copy, they'll be selling it afterwards. But all the students have a free copy of Buck. Is my mic still on? Yeah. I just felt it. Yeah? Okay, cool. So you guys have a copy of Buck. That's my memoir, right? Young Buck, Buck Wild, Buck Shots, Buck Town, Slave Buck, Black Buck, Make Buck, Buck Now. It's my story. It's a memoir about my life growing up in Philadelphia, and it's really a memoir about education. Buck is a memoir about education. When I say education, it's about miseducation, number one, because I was miseducated. It's about re-education, right, because I had to re-educate myself. It's about self-education, right, doing it ourselves and learning how to do things ourselves. And then it's about street education, right, about the education that I got not only in classrooms but in the streets and how that affected my life. And then it's also about the difference in the distance between school and education. Because a lot of times we think school and education is the same thing, but what I do in Buck is kind of talk about how they're different and my experience being in school and receiving education, right? And sometimes we can get educated in school when we're lucky. Oh, I knew this thing was off. I'm like, I'm gonna just keep rocking with it, but yeah. See that? Killed the mic. Mic killer. So, but anyway, so my book is about education. It's about, like I said, the difference in the distance between school and education. I talk a lot about, I was the youngest tenured professor in the history of my university, but I got kicked out of, and I'm saying that only to say the irony of it is I got kicked out of every school I went to growing up in Philadelphia. And so I want to talk about my journey educationally and how I came to where I am today and kind of some of my thoughts about it. As soon as he gets my mic right. We got to make sure we got to get my mic right. But yeah, so that's what I want to talk about. I come from Philadelphia. You heard a lot of things, in the bio, just in terms of what I've accomplished. But like I said, what doesn't get told a lot is like the struggle, and that's why I wanted to write Buck. I wanted to write Buck because a lot of people just see the success and they don't really understand like what went into it, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what education means to me. Education is so important to me, and when I say it's important to me, I don't just mean from getting a degree perspective, right? Paulo Freire, one of the great, philosophers, educators, right? He wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And in that book, he said the purpose of education is either one of two things. You either maintain the status quo or you transform it. The reason why I said I like Dr. Blake is because she's trying to transform the status quo. The status quo is we're not here, right? The status quo is, Black lives don't matter, right? That's all those things are the status quo. Brown lives don't matter. No life matters, right? Right? Like that's the status quo is the prison industrial complex. Status quo is the wars that are happening. All these things are the status quo. So I feel like our job, when you get educated, when you're here, when you're in school, is to transform that unless you're trying to maintain that. Unless you're trying to maintain the prison industrial complex as is, or unless you're trying to maintain, the military industrial complex as is, then our job is to transform it. Margaret Mead said we were born into an unjust world. We don't have to die in that shit. So this whole thing is about transforming the world and transforming and designing the reality we want to see. We don't have to just inherit and continue, And so, is my mic on yet? Y'all got my mic yet?
Talk to Mike.
So yeah. Oh,
Just keep doing your
Give
thing.
me one of these now.
No, we're just gonna put that there.
Okay, cool.
That's not a good mic.
Okay,
It's
cool.
gonna have to do it.
Okay, cool. So my journey starts in Philadelphia. It really starts in Zimbabwe. That's a longer story. I was born in Zimbabwe to parents who were African American. So automatically it was kind of an interesting situation, right? My parents are from America. I was born in Zimbabwe. And then we end up moving to Philly, to North Philly. And so I grew up in North Philly, and uptown Philadelphia, Germantown area, Olney area, and considered rough areas in Philadelphia. And I want to give you a little bit, I wanted to write a book. Yesterday I was at a school in D.C., in Washington, D.C., where they're reading this book. And Monday and Tuesday I'm going to be at the San Joaquin. San Joaquin. You can tell I'm from the East Coast. San Joaquin Juvenile Detention Center. I was at the Alameda Juvenile Detention Center. All these places they're reading this book, and the young people there. What I love about it, this is so much better. now you gotta drop that beat so I could just start, But what I love about it is the young people there. This book has created a lot of readers. People who weren't interested in reading before are now interested in reading, and it received an award for basically best literature for young people who are incarcerated or are on the streets or whatever, you know what I mean, or just out there, And for me, it's always been about, someone asked me today what my mission was. I think it was Adrian, and I said my mission is to create what I don't see. Like, that's so important to me, creating what I don't see. Like, everything that I've done has pretty much been a result of that. I have this mantra, right? The mantra is, if you make an observation, you have an obligation. That's pretty much the mantra I live my life by. You make an observation, you have an obligation. So what does that mean? That means when you observe something, like, damn, how come we don't have a conference that brings together all the schools, in the area, and we can get galvanized around leadership and da-da-da-da. How come we don't have, well, because we didn't make it yet. We didn't create it yet. And obviously someone saw that need and created this conference here, right? This retreat. And that's what I mean. It could be in any field. You make an observation. How come there's no this? How come there's no that? How come we don't have this? It's because you didn't make it yet. The reason why I wrote this book is because it didn't exist and I wanted it to exist. You know what I mean? The movie I did with Maya Angelou, The Black Candle, it was like, how come we don't have this film that celebrates, the culture, da-da-da-da-da-da, and Dr. Angelou's like, we haven't made it yet. That's why it doesn't exist. And so we make it. And so a lot of my life has been about just creating what I don't see, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, whether it's a movement, whether it's music, I was talking earlier about music and just kind of creating the sounds that we don't hear. All of those things is about like designing our own reality. And to me, that's what education is about. Education is about the language skills, the tools so that you can design your own reality. I remember there's so many things I want to tell you about school, education. I remember when I finally, I'm gonna go back in a minute, even further than I am now. But I remember when I first started getting into school a little bit, when I started to take it a little bit more seriously, and just seeing that and just learning that we weren't learning anything, just the disparity in education. I mean, one of the first poems I ever wrote was about education. It was called Two Sets of Notes, and it's basically my philosophy on like life, really. In life, you have to take two sets of notes, right? And it kind of comes from, my teacher, back in the day. She would tell us things. Oh, Christopher Columbus discovered America. You know what I mean? Da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, Christopher Columbus discovered America? Here, excuse me. I just discovered this. Thank you. So, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't discover someone else's shit. Like, so, I started to ask these questions. You guys didn't see, but I just took his phone and said I discovered it. But, you start to ask these questions. And so the first piece I ever wrote was called Two Sets of Notes. And I said to myself in that poem, I said, I find myself feeling as if I'm touching the ground and the ceiling. In schools that don't engage in healing, shit, they just open the wounds and entrap us in rooms where we are consumed by hypocrisy. But hold up. Even Greek philosophers weren't the authors of their own philosophies. And the statues on their campus be watching me. Washington, Jefferson, Williams, they clocking me, telling me my time's up. But look, I don't run laps on track. See, I run laps around the scholars of tomorrow because their new schools of thought are merely our histories borrowed. And they labeled me militant and black national radical. They tried to put my learning process on sabbatical. But I don't apologize. I spit truth into those eyes that have been infected by those lies. Then they try to get me to see their point of view from a cat that looked like me, but he don't walk like me, talk like me, or act like me. And homie started running when I asked if he was black like me, mastering their thoughts and forgetting your own. And you wonder why we always feel alone. From the media to academia, hanging brothers like coats. That's why in they schools, you gotta take 2 sets of notes. One set to ace the test, and the other set I call the truth. And when I found historical contradictions, I used that first set as proof that black youth's minds are being polluted and convoluted and diluted and not culturally rooted in anything except the Western massacre. That's why most of us in school, we was scared of Africa. We viewed our mother's land through the eyes of racists like David Hume and Immanuel Kant, not knowing Immanuel Kant tell me shit about a land he's never seen, a land rich with history, beautiful kings and queens. But they had us believe otherwise. The history they taught me built on high-rise lies. They didn't teach me that the pyramids were completed before Greece and Rome were conceptualized. Then they try to claim the Egyptians' race was a mystery. And I used to believe them until I went to Egypt and read Herodotus, book 2 of the histories. Can it be any clearer? Brown, black students, look in the mirror. You are a reflection of divinity. Don't let them fool you with selective memory. Walk high, listen to the elders who spoke. Black students, brown students, all students, always take 2 sets of notes. So that was like the beginning for me, in terms of, that was one of the first pieces that I ever really wrote. And it was about education, it was about my experience, in the system and just not what I was getting and what I felt really was a solution, a way out. Now, that was when I was probably, college, first year college, that kind of discovery was happening. But before then, there was a whole other thing happening, right? And this is what Buck is about, right? Buck starts when I'm 13 years old. Now, I didn't want to write a book that was me, looking back, talking about back in the days, I used to wild out and be Buck, I didn't want to write a book like looking back. I wanted to write a book that puts you where I was then, right? So that you could understand why I was Buck, right? When I say young Buck, Buck wild, Buck shots, Buck town, slave Buck, black Buck, make Buck, Buck now. I'm talking about young Buck first. I'm a young Buck in the city, you know what I mean? Buck wild, going crazy. Buck shots. Grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We called it Philadelphia, Pistolvania. I live in Baltimore, Maryland right now. They call it Bodymore Murderland, right? So I'm talking about the gun violence that I saw destroy my communities. I saw it take my best friend. When I say Bucktown, I'm talking about hip-hop. Bucktown, hip-hop reference, When I say slave Buck, black Buck, I'm talking about the racism that is inherent in that word, right? It used to be a derogatory term, when you were selling Africans during slavery, they would say, you got this black buck for sale. So when I talk about black buck, slave buck, I'm talking about that history, but I'm also talking about that present reality now of racism that we still deal with. You know what I mean? That we even have to say Black Lives Matter. That's even a statement. So make buck, right? When I say make buck, I'm talking about entrepreneurship and how to make it in America. And then when I say Buck now, I'm going to come back to that. But that's ultimately what Buck is about. I'll come back to that at the end. But Buck now is kind of like the thrust of the book. And then also Buck Naked. I ain't say that, but that's just, wanted to throw that in there. Buck Naked, you know what I mean? Now being Buck Naked is very important to what I'm about to say. And this is why. Writing a memoir, which is what Buck is vulnerable. It's basically like stripping naked in front of some strangers. You know what I'm saying? and everybody just kind of looking at you like, oh, I didn't know you. Oh, interesting, and people are just looking at you and staring at you, and that's how it feels. It's a vulnerable feeling. And so when I wrote this book and going through this process, I did feel buck naked, and it makes you feel buck naked. But what I discovered in that process, this was part of my education in writing a memoir, is that vulnerability is not weakness. A lot of times we think, and we're taught to think in this society that, oh, you're vulnerable, you're weak, and you put yourself in a weak position because you're vulnerable. But this vulnerability actually of exposing myself, of being honest, of giving you the truth of my life, actually gave me incredible power and strength. And so vulnerability in this case acts as your strength. It's your power. It's not a weakness, And so I felt very vulnerable and naked writing this book, telling you my story. But like I said, I wanted to do it in the first person present tense. So that means, like I said, it's not me looking back at my life, oh, back in the day. No, you're in it. From the moment you start reading Buck, I'm 13, welcome to my world, here we go, And I talk a lot about my family and just about how I got to where I got to. It starts off, I'll kind of give you a little bit. It starts off me and my brother. The fall in Philadelphia. Outside is the color of cornbread and blood. Change hangs in the air like the sneaks on the live wires behind my crib. Me and my big brother Uzi in the kitchen. He's rolling a blunt on top of the source. The one with Tyson on the cover, rocking a kufi, ice grilling through the gloss. Uzi can roll a blunt with his eyes closed. So this is my brother. This is the opening scene. This is my big brother. And in this opening scene, I have a lyric. Awake and cruise in a rude fashion, on the ass like Mike Tyson at a beauty pageant. Now that's just a random rap lyric. As you read the book, you'll come across these random lyrics. They're not really random, right? It's like when they ask you to step aside at the airport. Random. It's not random. There's a reason why you asked me to, But anyway, I digress. So these lyrics act as, they do a couple things. One, hip-hop was the soundtrack to my life. So you have hip-hop lyrics, right? The lyrics also correspond to what I'm going through. So whatever is going on in the book, the lyrics are corresponding. The lyrics also help us keep time in the book, because I don't say, oh, it's 1997 and 1998. So the only way you know is the lyrics have a timestamp on them, and that's how you keep time throughout the book. The lyrics are the book. And the other thing is I describe what I'm doing. I felt like a lot of black boys and brown boys when I was coming up had this thing, and so I wanted to give it a name. I said, I do this. I spit lyrics to songs under my breath all day, every day. The bars just jump out of me no matter where I am or what I'm doing. It's like I got hip-hop Tourette's, and that's basically what it was for me, hip-hop Tourette's, the involuntary spewing of rap lyrics just throughout. And so I wanted to do that throughout the book, because how many of y'all have hip-hop Tourette's? Couple people? I bet a few more of you have hip-hop Tourette's. You mean, what's that? Yeah, like you're just walking down the street and a lyric comes in your head and you sing it, People don't know where it comes from. No beat is on. No music is on. It's just in your head. So anyway, I wanted to do that. I also wanted to introduce people to the language of where I'm from, right? So in this opening scene, like my brother, for example, right? Language is very important to me, and I'll explain why. This opening scene, my brother, he's, rolling this blunt, and I said, he folds, rolls, tucks. Another perfect blunt. John looks like a paintbrush. See, and I want to explain to you what John means if you're not from Philly. John could mean anything, person, place, or thing. Sometimes if we're telling a story and we don't want people to know what we're talking about, we'll plug John in for everything. Yo, the other day I was at the joint around the corner with the young John from down the street, right? We get to the joint, right? And the boy at the door all on his joint, not knowing I had that joint on me. Man, it was about to be on in that joint. So joint is this interchangeable word. Yo, you got the joint? What's up with the joint? It could mean anything, right? And so you have to kind of you have to have context. You have to know. Like, if you just jumped in my conversation, we talking about the joint. You got the joint with the joint? You wouldn't know what we talking about. We could talk about anything. Now, why is that important? We're talking about education. Who cares about the joint? This is why it's important and why I'm so fascinated with language. Like, even like in the context of so the language that we use, everyday slang language, all these things, they all have history, they all have meaning, they all have origin, provenance. So it's interesting to me when I think about language and the history of language. So for example, black people in America, most of them come from Africa, West Africa, What's interesting is you heard in my bio, I've been to over 40 countries. So I was in Nigeria recently. Any Nigerians in here? That's actually very rare. Nigerians everywhere, but you know, seriously, I've never been in a room. Yeah. Okay. So look. So I did this thing, and I went to Nigeria, and it's over 400 languages spoken in Nigeria alone. Think about that. 400 languages, more than 400 languages in Nigeria alone. It's one country. 400 languages, that's so much. Okay, so now think about this. Think about the fact that when we talk about black people coming here, you know, as enslaved Africans, well, which out of those 400 languages did you speak? That's only one country, though. So you think about when black people came to America, we spoke all different languages, even though it's sometimes we think of Africa as a country with one language, but it's actually this huge continent with so many different languages. So we might look alike, kinda, but we have a completely different culture, completely different language. Yet we get to America and we all have to learn English because that is the language of the slave master, and the slave master wants to be able to tell us what to do. And in order to do that, we have to understand English, right? And so you have this history of like people learning this language, English, even though they're coming from all these different linguistic backgrounds. I speak Tree, you speak Swahili, you speak Hausa, Fulani, all these different African languages, but yet we all learn English. So now the challenge, right, and this is where John comes in. Now the challenge for black people in America is you have this language that's being taught to you by the oppressor, the person that's oppressing you, but how do you communicate with your peers to get free when the language, you only have this one language? I can't speak to you in an African language because you don't know my African language. We only know English together. So now we have to, in Philly, we call freak it. Now we got to freak the language. You know what I mean? Freaking the language is, you know, that's, you know, for example, back in the slave days, you know, there would be a situation where, let's say you have a bunch of different enslaved Africans and someone says, hey, did you hear MK escaped slavery? And let's say there was a slave master somewhere around, maybe in listening and earshot, and the other slaves say, MK escaped slavery? That's a bad nigger. Now, that's, you know, if the slave master hears that, bad nigger, yeah, that's a bad nigger because he escaped slavery, right? But anybody else who hears that's a bad nigger, they know that, oh, yeah, MK is the man. Like, you know what I mean? And so here you have a language situation where, you know, words are being said, and if you take the words literally, it means one thing, but again, because you're freaking the language, right, it means a completely other thing for the group that you're actually talking to. So that's the power of language, right? That's why when me and my brother are talking around my mom when we're 13, and I'm like, yo, you got the joint, what's up with the joint? My mom has no idea, but it comes from somewhere. It's this idea that language has the ability to either exclude or include, right? You can, and that's what education is all about. It's about getting the language that you need to go out into the world to design your own reality. Every world, every field has a language. If you don't understand the language of like in film, B-roll and long shots and wide shots and medium angles and all the lower thirds, if you don't understand that language, you can't work in this field. Right, but you come to school, you get educated to learn that particular language. So now when somebody says that's a bad, you'll know. You know what I mean? But this is the other thing about that analogy, that example. As soon as the slave master, because he will, one day realize, when those guys say bad, they really mean good. When he figures that out, then we don't say that shit no more. We go on, we've created another saying, another term, another line. So it's like this constant chase, right? And so that's the kind of like the history, I think, of black language in America. And it has sometimes we laugh at it and we think, oh, it's just slang or it's just but it has this really revolutionary, powerful history that's all tied into liberation. How you gonna get free if they can understand everything you're saying? That's you won't. So anyway. But this book isn't about that. This book is about my family. It's about my brother, number one, right? So my brother's name is Uzi. Uzi is the color of walnuts and has a long, sharp face like the African mask my dad hangs up everywhere. His name is Daoud. My parents call him Daoudi, and the hood calls him Uzi. He's got a bunch of other names, too, like some superhero. Uwap, Daoud, Uzito, Wap the Culture, Cool D, Pinch P, Big U, Barker Lark, Drop the Miss Rhyme, Big Fly, and Still to Kill. Those are all my brother's names. So in this opening scene, my brother and his friend, they want to steal a car. I want to go with them. And this is how it always goes. Me following Uzi and everything, everywhere, like his little black JanSport. Covered in marks a lot, strapped tight to his back, koala style. Anywhere, any place. He does it, I do it. He tries it, I'm trying it. He can shit, why can't I? Sometimes I even duck like him under doorways, even though he's way taller, and I don't even need to duck. I follow Uzi everywhere, and now to joyride through Philly in a stolen wheel. Being with Uzi makes me feel invincible, like nothing bad can happen to us, like nothing and nobody can hurt us. I feel unfuckwittable. Anybody ever felt unfuckwittable? That's how education makes you feel. When you're educated, you're unfuckwittable. Nobody can fuck with you. So, no, it's true. Okay, so I talk about my brother in this book because in the opening scene of this book, my brother's locked up. He gets arrested. Cops come, 40 cops. They bust down our door. Changes my whole life. It changes the whole course of my family. My mom is a strong woman from Brooklyn, and she completely breaks down behind it. My dad, he's got a really interesting story. He's one out of 16 children from Valdosta, Georgia. Grew up as a sharecropper picking cotton in the South. And so my parents have this really interesting history. But this thing with my brother, and it just kind of like was the end of our family as we knew it. So my brother goes to jail. He's in solitary confinement for almost a year. Different places, Philadelphia, Arizona. My mom has like a real severe mental meltdown, really. She's already kind of had severe depression already, but now she's suicidal. She's trying to kill herself. My father leaves, and so it's really just me and my mom, but my mom's not really there. And so I wrote a book about this period in my life when it was really dark because, like I said, my brother, who was like my everything, me and him were really close. He was away. My mom, and one of the things I wrote about in the book was just kind of like mental health issues. My mom's diary that I used to read, I used to secretly read her diary. It's in the book. Her diary entries are actually in the book, interwoven into my narrative because I wanted you to understand kind of where she was mentally. This was a woman that didn't want to live, didn't want to be here. One of her diary entries, she says, yes, I can function, but the point is I don't want to function. I want no part of this life. That's what my mom said. She would take, so all these things were going on, right? Brother's gone. Pops eventually leaves, moves outside of Philadelphia. And so now you have the situation of, now you understand where the buck wild comes from, right? I said young buck wild, because we have, on our neighborhood, we have corner boys. There's a lot of negative influences everywhere, right? We got corner boys, we got anything you want to get involved in, anything you don't want your child to get involved in is kind of what I was involved in. So I guess around the age of like 13, 14, that's when it just all went south for me. I started hanging with my brother's friends who were in a gang, and they sold drugs and guns and all types of other stuff. And it was just like crazy. Like my brother had this love for me, this deep love for me. And these guys kind of felt like my brothers because they were older than me and they were my brother's friends. But my brother like wouldn't let me do certain things, because he didn't want me to get in trouble. And these guys, they didn't care about that. They would want me to do things to get in trouble or whatever. And so I started kind of going through a real bad cycle where just a lot of negativity was around me. I was around a lot of darkness. Each school that I was in, I got kicked out of within, a couple months of being in the school. So I bounced around to lots of different schools, and I got a chance to see a lot of different school systems in Philadelphia. I write about that. I write about the pipeline. The pipeline, for example, is the school-to-prison pipeline. And that's something that's like, really apparent across our nation. But, some schools are obviously preparing us for higher education, and some schools are preparing us literally for jail. And I write about just kind of those disparities and those differences and how a lot of smart kids coming up can peep that and don't even want to be here. Like, what's the point? Like, they already peep it way before, anything. They already are hip to what's going on here. You know what I mean? They see the pipeline, and so they see it for what it is. So they don't want to be here, and you want to. we're trying to get them to be here, and we, as adults, we want them to be here, but at the same time, they see what's going on, right? And so I write about the pipeline, I write about these schools. For a long time, me and education or me and school didn't get along because it was like all about rote memory and regurgitation. Like, I didn't feel like I was learning, right? A teacher comes in, she writes some stuff on the board, she tells you to copy it, and then you take a test, and it's like, is this what this is what education is? This is what's gonna allow me to design my own reality in life? No, this isn't. This is going to put me in a job that I don't want to do, with people that I don't want to be around, right? I know what this is for, right? So anyway, so there was a lot of rejection to that, and so a lot of my book is kind of like there's a dark period, right? And you'll be, it's a big dark period where my best friend dies, and I'm out in the streets, and a lot of craziness. I'm not gonna go into all the craziness now. This is a retreat on education, so I'm gonna focus on the educational parts. But like, there's some other kind of education going on in the book too that you'll read about. It's very raw. I wanted to write a book. I didn't want to write a book that was like, sanitized. You know what I mean? That's not really how I roll. Like, this is either going to be the truth or I'm not going to write a book. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt about it. And so a lot of it, when it is dark, it's dark. And you'll read a lot about, like I said, like my brother's letters from prison are in there. My mom's incredibly dark, dense letters. Her diary is in there. And then the experiences that I'm going through on the streets of Philly are very dark and, dismal. But I want to talk about kind of like what happened and how that changed. So this is a crazy story, but my friend was on the run, and we decided to drive to Texas. I was 16, he was 16. We thought it would be a good idea. I had a cousin in Texas. We're in Philly. I'm like, yo, let's just go to Texas. So we drive to Texas, 25 hours. We get to Texas, and when I get to Texas, my mom, I get a call from a beeper page, actually. I'll show you how old I am. They paged me and told me my mom had overdosed or whatever in Philly. So we drove back up to Philly, and I'm sitting there with my mom, and she's in the hospital. She's got all these tubes in her, machines, and the whole works. And the doctor tells me about how she just barely, she could have died, and she took 60 pills and all this crazy stuff, right? And I'm sitting there with my mom, and we sat there for 2 days. And so prior to this, I had been kicked out her house. I wasn't living with my mom, wasn't living with my dad. I was just on my own, just doing my own thing, being around just the most negative influences you can imagine. You'll read about it. And I'm in there with my mom. It's the first time we've kind of really talked in a long time. And one of the things she told me, it's a quote from Malcolm X. She said, education is your passport to the future. Education is your passport to the future. And she kept telling me I have to go to school. I wasn't in school at this point. I wasn't in school. You have to go to school. Milo, MK, that's my name. You have to go to school, Milo. And I said, Ma, because I got kicked out of this school called Fells. I said, Ma, I would go to school. I thought I was smart. I would go to school, but no school would take me. That was my defense, because I got kicked out of a school that was really a bad school. So if you get kicked out of that school, where you going to go from there? So I'm like, Ma, no school would take me. She's like, well, if I found a school that would take you, would you go to school? And like I said, she's got the tubes and the machines all in her. I'm not about to have them, machines, flatline and not. So I'm like, you know what, just for the sake of the situation, sure, Mom, I'll go to school, even though I wasn't feeling school. So anyway, she finds a school a couple weeks later, and she's like, look, I'm going to tell you, it's an alternative school. It's not like your normal school. Whatever. Cool. I don't really care. I'm just doing this for you, Mom, whatever. Some of the schools I went to in my life looked like factories, warehouses, prisons. This alternative school looked like a gingerbread house. And I didn't know what to expect. I get there, walk up, and I look at it, and, I'm telling you, these were the weirdest kids I've ever seen in my life. To this day, I've never seen a group of people this strange. It's unbelievable how strange they were. One kid was banging his head against the wall, and he was using his own, that's funny, but that's not even the story. He was using his own blood, to make a painting. And I'm like, this is an alternative school? I was like, I'm not this damn alternative. You know what I mean? Send me to the regular school. I'm regular. I'm normal. But anyway, I stuck it out for my mom. And one day I'm in this class. It's an English class. And the teacher brings out blank pieces of paper. And she's like, okay, class, write. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what you want me to write? You know, everybody, now the whole class starts scribbling fast like reporters at a press conference, you know, just going off. And I'm just, you know, I haven't done schoolwork in a while at this point in my life, and I'm just kind of chilling. And so she comes over to me and she says, MK, Marlo, right. And now I'm frustrated. I'm like, I'm 16. I'm like, yo, what you want me to write? You know what I mean? Why you cramping my space, you know, cramping my style, giving me individual attention, you know? I'm not used to this. And I'm like, what you want me to write? And she's like, write anything you want. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, I immediately didn't believe her, right? Because you know how people are full of, like, you walk across the campus, somebody might say, hey, how you doing? Hey, what's up? How's it going? But they don't really want to know how you doing. Like, if you told them all the stress, all the bullshit you're going through, they would back out real quick. They'd be like, I was just saying it to be nice. I got to go. Like, nobody really wants. So people say things all the time like, yeah, tell me how you feel. Yeah, tell me. And then you tell them, and they're like, oh, let me get away from this dude. So, you know, so she said, write anything you want. And I just immediately knew she was bullshit. Nah, she don't want. Okay, I got something. Anything I want? Got something for you. Fuck school. So I wrote fuck school really big. That was the first creative thing I ever wrote in creative writing class. And that's how I felt. And she looked at it, and she said, good, now keep going. And see, she was really, she played me, actually, because I thought that what was going to happen, well, I had planned it out, right, that I would say fuck school. She would get really mad, of course, because you can't say fuck school in school. She would get really mad. She would kick me out, and then I would get to go back to my neighborhood. And that would be that. And, you know, then I would come to school next day and not do anything, whatever. So anyway, that was my plan. But she said, good, now keep going. So then this is what happened. And I'll read to you from there. So I turn the page over, and it's blank again. The blank page is the starter pistol that fires and triggers my mind to sprint. Damn, what will I write? What will I say? Will I say what I write what I say? Something funny, something serious, something about my family, something about Ryan? Whose story will I tell? My story? What about a story about a boy from Philly, a lost boy who wants to find himself but doesn't know where to look, who wants to tell his story but doesn't know where to begin or end, who searches anyway and discovers something about himself, about the world? I stare at the blank page, an ocean of white alive with possibility. I hear myself take a breath, then exhale, deep like I just rose from underwater. It's like I'm at the free throw line again, foul shots, like the game is on the line again. I remember something my pops told me, shoot to make it. My hand's shaking now, trembling like it's freezing. Then it hits me, a silence louder than all the music I've ever heard in my life. All the light in the world in one beam before me. I grip the pen and something shoots up my spine, sits me straight up. The pen feels heavy, like it's made of stone. At exactly which point do you start to realize that life without knowledge is, anybody know that? Death in disguise. I stare deep into the blank page and see myself. I feel something I've never felt before. Purpose. I don't know what my exact purpose is yet, but I know it has something to do with this pen and this blank page. I am the blank page. Holding the pen this way, snug and firm in my fist, makes me feel like I can write my future, like I can spell out my destiny in sharp strokes. The blank page begs me to tell a story, dares me to tell one that's never been told before, and to tell it like it will never be told again. The blank page lights up a room in my heart that I didn't even know existed. So I started writing in this class, and I ain't stopped yet. And that was many, many years ago. It activated a lot within me. I started to really reflect on my life, on who I was, what other people were writing, and it made me a reader. Because, you know, I wanted to be a good writer, and teacher one day said, well, you know, it was funny because I was starting to like this writing thing, right? But I couldn't let my teacher know yet. You know, I was 16, 17. So she's like, Milo, it seems like you're taking to this writing thing. But I'm like, it's cool, you know. It's cool. But really, I was feeling it. Inside, I was like, yes, this is so amazing. But I was still trying to be cool about it and, But then eventually, she said, well, if you want to be a good writer, you got to be a good reader. And I started reading voraciously. I mean, I hadn't read, up until that point, there was a lot of things that I hadn't read. So I felt like I had to make up for lost time. So, there was a period where I read a book a day. And I would just devour books and just, like, eat them up, And I became, and I had an epiphany I write about in the book. I say, this is one of the epiphanies I had when I started reading. I say, oh, now I see why reading was illegal for black people during slavery. I used to always hear that back in the day. The old heads would tell you, back in the day, reading used to be illegal, during slavery. And you would hear it, but you're young. It doesn't really mean anything to you until I really started to reflect on the reality of what that really meant, right? The reality of, me and Keita over here, we could be locked up during the slave days, you know what I'm saying? We in jail together. Keita like, yo, MK, what you do? I'm like, yo, I was on like chapter 9, and they just busted, you know what I mean? It's like, you got book for a book? Yes, you could get book for a book back in the day. If you had a reading club back in the day, you would have to have lookouts. Ooh, 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 ooh. You know what I mean? Like, let you know that the cops were coming because you couldn't just read openly. You got books in the car. You got to throw them out the window. People hiding books in the ass crack. All types of stuff. It's crazy. But you start thinking about, damn, why for a book? Like, a book? Why? What's so revolutionary about it, right? But what I started to realize as I started reading and writing was that we sub-vocalize, right? Sub-vocalization. We think in words, right? So when you limit someone's vocabulary, you don't just limit their vocab. What else do you limit? Thoughts. You're limiting everything. And so you can't even get to certain ideas because you don't have the language to access. Again, going back to language, right? You don't have the language to access. That's what education is about. Getting the language necessary, the tools necessary, the linguistic tools to unlock, right, the doors to where you're trying to go. Or getting the tools to bust those damn doors open. You know what I'm saying? Forget messing around with a lock. Just bust that whole joint open. So, that's part of my realization. And so when I started to realize that, my vocabulary, I started to realize that, wow, my thoughts and my vocabulary are growing together. They're going to grow together like the stem and petals on a flower, right? And this is going to be me. And this is, so in a lot of ways, reading, writing, literacy was my liberation. It was emancipatory for me. It opened up everything and allowed me to design my reality. And now I'm here talking to you, and it's crazy because I didn't expect this, many, many years ago. And so thank you for listening. I want to leave you with one more idea about leadership, and then I'll open it up for questions. So there's this old preacher's tale about a woman, blind woman, and these kids come to her door, and the woman, her name is Miss Sally. We'll call her Miss Sally. Miss Sally, they come to the blind woman's door and say, Miss Sally, we have a bird in our hand. We need you to tell us if it's dead or alive. And Miss Sally, she's a blind woman, so she can't see, but she has vision, which is different, And so she says, I don't know if the bird is dead or alive. There's only one thing I know. And the kids say, well, what's that? She says, it's in your hands. So that's so powerful to me because that's how I feel about our futures. Like, is our future hopeful? Is it dim? Is it grim? What is it? Where are we going? Like this next generation. And I always feel like it's in that bird. Like those kids could let it fly and go to new heights, or they could crush it in their own hands. So when you ask yourself, where are we going as a generation, as young people, as new leaders? I don't know. There's only one thing I know, and it's in our hands. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. Thank you. So now if you have questions, comments, thoughts, let's just open it up, right? Sure. Should I hand the mic to people? Okay.
Hello? I'm born and raised in East Oakland, and just it's probably the same scene like you said in Baltimore and everywhere else in Philly. So I have a lot of cousins who it's just hard to get them out of that funk, and they have just as much potential as all of us. And so they just see me as, oh, yeah, I'm from the same place as them, but yet they feel like I'm different, and like, yo, yeah, that's you can do that, but they feel like they can't. Like, what would you advise? How would you advise me to try to get them into school?
That's a great question. Yeah, so obviously I've dealt with that throughout my life as well. I think it's really important to continue to. What I try to personally do is I try not to what I would call preach, right? But I try to just by my example, let that kind of be the preaching in a way. You know what I mean? To let them see, so to let them to really experience life with my brothers, you know what I'm saying, and let them who need to see me, and then ask me like, yo, how do you, I feel like a lot of times for me it comes from them because I'm not preaching to them, but then they see like doing what I want to do, and I'm and I have this information, and I'm moving in a particular way, and they want that, and because that's what everybody wants, right? We all want that success, and so I feel like that's when they come to me, and then I kind of explain to them like this is the situation, or just exposing them to little things, putting them on a little thing. Yo, like I was speaking at Harvard, having one of my boys from the block. Yo, come with me up to Boston real quick. He like, where we going up to Boston for? Just come with me. You know what I mean? Like, just exposure. Exposure changes everything. You know what I mean? So exposing, giving somebody a book. You know what I mean? Giving somebody something to listen to. Whatever it is, just exposure. That's what I love about being a professor, because I feel like you could replace the title professor with exposer. Because that's what you do, right? You expose things to people, right? You give them that access that they didn't have. So I would just say exposure. Keep exposing them to things.
I just wanted to ask about your family. How is your family doing?
Well, my family's doing like all y'all families are doing. You got some that are doing good, some that are struggling, some that are here, some that are in between. It's the same thing. So but one thing that's good about the book is everybody. I can definitely say we're better than we were in this book. We were going through it in Buck, but there's still obviously issues. Like for example, my mom, severe mental health issues. That doesn't go away. That doesn't, even when you're better, even when your things are looking greater and you're doing it, it's not something that just disappears. My brother, spending so many years in jail. Yeah, he's not in jail anymore, but again, that's not something that just goes away. It's not expunged. So it creates turbulence and obstacles in one's life. But I think, so they're all that kind of like in different places. But I will say that when you read the book, we've really grown from that place, which is positive, So what else? Come on, not everybody at once. I know. Yeah, there you go. Oh.
So when you wrote school, that wasn't the first time you ever wrote anything, was it? And the reason I'm asking, because when I teach, I have some students who come in, and they can't write, or they say they can't write, and that wasn't the first time you read. And I have students who can't read. So what would you tell those folks and say, hey, I can't do it. I can't read. I can't write.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the first thing I wrote creatively. Like I had written things before, just go to school, whatever. But in terms of like being asked to write something creatively, and just kind of freestyling it, that was what came out. Are you talking about like writer's block or people, or just not wanting to write at all? Yeah. I would honestly, just not trying to sound self-promotional, I would give them Buck. And let me just explain to you why. I have so many people. I can't tell you every day. I get messages. I get email, everything. People come up to me in the street. Like, I'll give you an example. A Philly dude come up to me the other day. Say, yo, I don't even fuck with books, but your shit, I'll fuck with Buck. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's, you know, because this is the thing about me as a reader. I didn't know I love reading until I read the right book. See, the thing is, a lot of times we say, oh, black people don't read, young people don't read. That's bullshit. You're giving them the wrong books. They don't want to read Beowulf again. Like, it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, they, like, chill. Like, give them, you know, nothing. No shots thrown. You know what I mean, at Beowulf. I'm just saying, though. Like, can we get Buck? Like, you know, like, can we have something that that's interesting, that relates to us, that we could laugh at, is you know, something that, because I feel like, so that's my thing. I think when you find that work that resonates and connects with them, you realize that you actually have a bunch of readers on your hands and writers. Because I wasn't either or, right? I wasn't supposed to be a reader or a writer, but that you know, that thing. And so you gotta, to me, that's why, as you know, as a professor, you gotta find those things. Like, one of the best compliments I received ever was from a guy who worked at worked at a correctional facility, and he said to me, he said, I give your books and Sherman Alexie books to kids who hate reading. And I just, that meant a lot to me. Number one, I like Sherman Alexie, but number two, also, the kids that hate reading. That's what he gives. He gives them Buck, and it gives them my work, and that's what helps them turn the corner and realize that, oh, all reading doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be this. It can be interesting. It can be engaging. It can relate to me in some way, you know. So I think that's important, you know. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'll get it.
Oh, thanks. No. We balling now. Got 2 mics.
Hi, my name is Brianna. I'm the president of Associated Students at Berkeley City College.
Oh,
and
nice.
my question to you is, what do you feel like it will take from us students? What do you recommend? Because we're student leaders on campus, yes, right? We have so many things to do, and you know, our attention is all over the place, and you know, we have all these great ideas, and there's a lot of rhetoric happening, you know, regarding a lot of things, and some things aren't happening. But what do you recommend? Because we know that it takes a lot of work, right? And so we think in our head, sheesh, is it going to happen before I even die? You know, so sometimes I personally get discouraged, although we keep the train going. But what do you recommend, and what is your advice to making change happen that we can touch, we can see? You know, it'll happen in our lifetime, in our generation, to keep us motivated, to keep us going, knowing that there's so much work that needs to be done. And what's the most effective thing that we could be doing as student leaders to get that, to touch the larger picture?
Yeah, that's a great question too. A couple questions. I mean, I think one is what you said about keeping the train going. That's one of the things, and it's a tricky thing because I feel like it's so beautiful, like the struggle, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates, Talib Kweli, they have this work, the beautiful struggle, right? So I think like there's this beautiful struggle that exists where a lot of times when we're struggling, when we're working, it's not romantic, you know? It's not pretty, you know? In fact, James Baldwin said the fear of pursuing what you really love is basically the de-romanticization of that thing. You realize that you know, you want to be a writer, and you become a writer, and you realize, oh, it's not like how I imagined it would be in the movies when you're sitting up late with the cigarette and, you know, and the smoke and black and white, and you get the call, oh, the book's a bestseller. You know, it's not like